What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to episode 49 of the Silver and Gold. I'm Josh.
And I'm Mike.
Today, we're going to be talking about probably more Niners-centric topics today. So if you're a Raider fan tuning into the channel, I know we have plenty of, loyal fans of the channel who are Raider fans, Joel, Anthony, and more that I'm forgetting off the top of my head. If you guys hop into the chat, ask questions. We'll be able to answer any Raider questions when, we're going in between our topics. But for now, we're going to go ahead and begin starting with the horrible news that we got over the weekend regarding the 49ers first round pick, Ricky Pearsall, the wide receiver out of, is it Florida or Florida State?
Florida.
Out of Florida. So Mike and I, we were getting ready to, begin a fantasy football draft in our league. Mike is checking his phone and then he turns to me and he's like, I'm not even joking to you right now. He goes, Ricky Pearsall just got shot. And I'm like, I'm just in shock. I'm like, you're messing with me. It's just crazy that it's out of nowhere. And I feel like Ricky Pearsall has already had a little bit of bad injury luck to start out his NFL career. And this is something that he didn't really need. I think he's catching a really rough break. So, my heart goes out to Ricky Pearsall. You never want to hear that for any NFL player, let alone, a kid that's just beginning his career. He's trying to right now make a name for himself in such a competitive wide receiver room. So, he was, I guess, at a meet and greet where he was signing autographs for fans. And then I want to say that that was in Daly City. And then he went shopping, I guess, in Union Square for, I guess, a luggage to take around while the team goes on road trips for the year. And then, somebody, 17-year-old kid just noticed that, he was wearing a Rolex and he wanted the Rolex and tried to rob Ricky Pearsall. And I think Ricky Pearsall's like, no. I don't know exactly how the altercation went down. Nobody knows except for the people who were actually there, or if you ask Ricky Pearsall himself. But there was an altercation. Ricky Pearsall got shot through the chest. It luckily did not hit any vital organs or his spine. So Ricky Pearsall is lucky to be alive, and just thank God for that, because it's such an avoidable tragedy. Forget the whole NFL thing. If he never returns to play football again, I'm just glad that he's alive, because that could have been a really bad tragedy that happens too often. Somebody runs up on somebody going to rob them. The person doesn't give it up, and tragedy strikes. Right? I don't know, Mike. Do you have any thoughts on the whole situation?
Nothing major that you haven't already said. Just it was just wild in the moment, because it was all right, first thing I saw was breaking news: Ricky Pearsall, rookie receiver of the Niners, shot in Union Square. And I was like, okay. I was just what is going on? This is now by far the worst first off-season, preseason a player has ever had. But in all seriousness, immediately after that, you said you saw a tweet where he was in critical condition. And I was like, dude, like that was my first thought, was just like, that, how bad is it? And
Yeah.
thankfully it wasn't too serious. I mean, it's a gunshot. I mean, it's serious, but it could have been so much worse. Um, and the fact that he was shot in the chest, like he's probably inches away from feeling much different right now. You know, uh,
Well, he's inches away from, like, it being in the chest, it could have hit his heart. It could have, like I said, hit his spine. Hell, I mean, it could have even gone through one of his lungs.
yeah,
It could have
yeah,
attacked, or like got, one of his arteries or something. Like just a few inches one way or the other. So it was like kind of a miracle in that regard. And then just shout out to the police officer or first responder who reassured Ricky that he was going to be okay, because I want to say I saw something where he was questioning if he was going to die,
mm,
and I want to say it was a police officer, somebody from the SF police department. She was telling him it's not your time. So yeah, I saw good news today that Ricky Pearsall is already back in the weight room. So, that's great news. He's obviously not going to return to play for at least 4 weeks. I wouldn't expect him. Honestly, I don't even expect that he'll be back in 5 weeks. We'll just kind of have to see like how he takes the recovery process. I I don't necessarily know, because it's pretty rare. Like, there's guys like Brian Robinson, Tank Dell, who have been shot. But I mean, I'm not a medical professional. I don't know like really detailed when the return to play is from something like that. But like I said, I'm just glad that he's able to live to see another day. And yeah, he was released from the hospital the next day, so that was also good news. And just he's really lucky, unlucky, but lucky. You know,
yep, 100%. Yeah, yeah, it's an unfortunate situation, but it could have been so much worse.
hmm
So,
yeah. We're gonna move on to the Brandon Ayuk extension. We're still praying for Ricky Pearsall that he makes a speedy recovery. But before we get into that, I do see Fonzie in the comments. Fonzie, welcome back. Long time no see. One of the day one channel viewers. He says, "Good luck this season, guys." Fonzie, we appreciate that. It's good to see you back on. You're getting ready. It looks like you had an off season as well, so hopefully you're refreshed and ready, and maybe the Niners will make this Super Bowl run. We'll see. Health comes before anything. I'm glad that he's in the clear. Now it's time to focus on recovery. Yeah, health before anything. So just luckily he, luckily that he's alive. Luckily he's not paralyzed, and the shot went right through, so they didn't have to like take any. They didn't have to take the bullet out. You know, risk an infection that way. So, yeah, Mike, there is another 49ers wide receiver that has been in the news. I don't know if you've heard that Brandon Ayuk has been trying this entire time to get a contract extension from the 49ers, but it's finally over. It literally, Brandon Ayuk got extended like what, the day after our most recent episode, or was that like 2 days after?
I think it was a couple days after. Yeah, I mean, I know we had Grant on, and he was saying, we asked him, where do you think this is going? And he was just like, I think he's getting traded. And a lot of the signs were pointing that way. My take had been the Niners have contractual, power over him. Like they don't need to be bending for him. Whereas he's kind of demanding this, and there comes a point where, I mean, John Lynch said pretty recently, like right before the contract happened, he said at some point he's got to play, right? And it's true because if Ayuk just sat out and was like, no, I'm not going to play unless I get signed, like, well, guess what? We don't have to sign you because we can franchise tag you, you know? Now, granted, I could see reasoning where maybe the Niners think, we'd rather be able to use that franchise tag for Brock Purdy. Maybe. We'll see, I guess. I mean, now they have, we're going to get there, but now they have the ability to do that, I think, next year or the following year, whatever. But point being, I just felt it would be stupid of Ayuk not to agree to a deal, and it would be stupid of the Niners not to raise their offer. Like if the reporting was true of like, oh, it was 26 and then, at most 27.5. Well, in the past couple of months, that price tag is way too cheap. And the Niners did that to themselves. So I think at the end of the day, to me, it's like, I think Ayuk won. Ayuk won because he got a 4-year deal when he could have been stuck on 2 more years of franchise tags. Or I don't know if this year's the 5th-year option or next year, but, he could have been on a couple more years of like around the 6th highest paid or even less highest paid receiver in the league. Now he's getting paid $30 million a year. No questions asked. He's good. So, yeah, it worked out for him. So, yeah. I don't know how you feel about.
I want to say that this year is going to be the 5th-year option, and then the extension is going to be 4 years after that, right?
That sounds about right, yeah.
Yeah, so that will take him to about when he's going to be like 30, 31. So the Niners will have him for the entirety of his prime, unless it extends further beyond that. But what I will say is I am personally very happy about Brandon Ayuk getting this extension. I know, like, typically you can kind of replace wide receivers kind of like Brandon Ayuk because, I mean, wide receivers are a dime a dozen, and it's not like Brandon Ayuk's skill set is like proprietary to where he is like a gadget player. He's just a really good route runner. He's got good hands. He stays healthy. He's got a great work ethic. I think, if there is one guy who has earned his contract from the 49ers in recent years, it's got to be Nick Bosa and it's got to be Brandon Ayuk. And Fred Warner. I had like mixed feelings about when they signed Debo a couple years ago. And here was my thing about Debo. It was like Debo's first year was solid. It was, it was pretty good. And then his second year wasn't that great. Then his third year was fantastic. It was amazing. And then they gave him top of the line dollar for that. So it was kind of like an inconsistent report card. And ever since then, we have gotten inconsistent production out of Deebo Samuel. We have not gotten what we got in 2021 out of Deebo Samuel since he signed the contract. That being said, Brandon Ayuk has been incredibly consistent every single year that he's been here. He's been healthy. He's been available. Knock on wood that stays, because with the 49ers luck, they always give somebody, a massive extension and then they never replicate it, or they don't keep the consistency. Like Nick Bosa last year signed literally right before week 1 and then, didn't have as great of a season as he had the year prior where he won Defensive Player of the Year. I feel like part of that has to do with the 49ers negotiation tactics and like waiting for the last moment, where they just decide to cave. And we're actually going to be talking about that in a little bit, like in maybe 2 topics. But, it's just a pattern that we have seen with the 49ers where they'll play hardball, and then they'll eventually cave in the end. And, I just, I don't like that form of negotiation. I guess as a fan, because one, it's not my money, and I want to see these great players getting paid. You know, I understand there's a salary cap, but when a guy like Brandon Ayuk is, literally the past couple years, especially last year, shows up to practice every single day and is like, you know, one of the leaders on the team, setting the tone every single day. I think you should compensate him in order to set an example for the other players on the team that if they put in that same work and they're as consistent, they're going to get taken care of instead of, oh, we're gonna penny pinch you, and then we're only gonna pay like our favorite players. Because I think it's no secret that Debo Samuel has a really good relationship with Kyle Shanahan, probably a better relationship than Brandon Ayuk has. But I just really feel like he's a great player, and like I've said probably like 3 or 4 times now, he's earned an extension. He was incredibly efficient last year, and if you're going to support Brock Purdy, you want to have him, have one of his best weapons, right? McCaffrey's not going to last forever. Debo Samuel is already like, like I said, Debo's not bad. He's just inconsistent and doesn't run as great of routes as Brandon Ayuk does. So I think my preference, and I said this all the way back, draft time. Do you remember, Mike, when they drafted Ricky Pearsall and I said, oh man, that means Ayuk's gone, right? And then I was like, wait a second, because I want to say there was like a report out at the time that the Niners were shopping Debo, and they didn't end up trading him. But I think I remember saying, I was like, man, you know how happy I would be if they choose to keep Brandon Ayuk and then they trade Debo? Because I can see the vision where the 49ers try to transition to an offense that's like maybe a little less, gadget plays with Debo Samuel and maybe like, try and spread the field out a little bit and get like a little better route runners. Because what really killed them in the Super Bowl was the inability to beat press man coverage. And if you can get a guy like hopefully Pearsall can be that guy to, to be the second best route runner on the team. We'll see when he comes back. Hopefully, he comes back soon. But I think for right now, and as of today, they restructured Debo Samuel's contract to where I want to say they probably are telling us that Debo's probably going to be here through next year too, which I don't know exactly how to feel. The Niners always do this, man, where they try and create a lot of cap space and restructure guys that I just don't know exactly why. Like, you're kind of kicking the can, down the road, but at a certain point, you just gotta, I don't know. Yeah, I feel like there is a time and a place to do it, but certain players like Debo, I wouldn't personally do it. Like they've restructured Kittle. Kittle's still great, but he, Kittle also experiences injuries, so I'm just I don't know. I get kind of mixed feelings when they start restructuring these guys, and honestly, I say mixed feelings. I don't like it because these players are kind of older and you want to be all in on your younger guys. I think this Ayuk extension means that they are going to build around this new core, hopefully going forward when they ultimately have to extend Brock Purdy next year. So the new core of the 49ers is not going to be George Kittle, not going to be Kyle Juszczyk. It's not going to be, it's not Eric Armstead anymore. This new core of this team is going to be going forward. Obviously they still have this window this year, but the new core going forward beyond next year is going to be Brock Purdy, Brandon Ayuk, Nick Bosa, and maybe Fred Warner. Those would be like the core 4 players. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and I think they have some dart throws in Pearsall and Jacob Cowing. And I think Jacob Cowing's another name to throw out there for the beating press man argument that you brought up, for the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
I think Cowing's going to develop a really good player, and eventually Juwan Jennings will not be a Niner, whether it's not until after 2025. But I think Cowing is the guy that probably is the reason why he's not a Niner. In the same sort of breath of, maybe Pearsall is the reason why Debo is no longer a Niner in a year or two, if not among other reasons, whether it's due to inefficiency or, not being consistent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is from our SF 49ers. The 49ers and Brandon Ayuk have agreed on a 4-year, $120 million contract extension with $76 million in guarantees, which is practically the Amon-Ra St. Brown deal. I know Amon-Ra St. Brown is a great receiver, but I do think that Ayuk is comparable. And I think if the 49ers wanted to, they could feature Ayuk more. They just haven't had to. So I think if Ayuk was used a little bit more, he would probably have more comparable receiving numbers to Amon-Ra. But I'd say like skill set wise, I don't know. I think it's pretty close. Like, the numbers will say one thing, but if you like actually look at the two players play, I kind of have a preference for Ayuk, but maybe I'm biased. And I also wanted to bring up too Debo Samuel's contract restructure, and this is per Field Yates, but this is also tweeted and put nicely by our SF 49ers. The 49ers restructured the contract of wide receiver Debo Samuel, creating $16.4 million in cap space. So, yeah, I guess it just kind of depends how they are restructuring it. Is this going to be one of those cases where it's going to be dead money if they get rid of Debo after next year? Like, I don't know. What are they freeing up this cap space for?
So I have an idea not only on what they're freeing up the cap space for, I also have an idea of maybe why they drafted a Pearsall and a Jacob Cowing other than just being the top players on their board at that time. Just thinking about it right now, okay? If this restructure points towards not only is Debo going to be here this season, obviously, but now it's like, all right, for sure, like the dead cap hit is way too big. They can't just let Debo go next offseason. If that's true, I think what they're doing is just perfectly setting up Brock Purdy to have just a plethora of options to throw to, at least for the next 2 seasons. But with Pearsall and Cowing moving forward, and now Ayuk for 4-5 more years, they're setting up pretty well, not only for Purdy to play well with, receivers to throw to surrounding him on the offense, but also I don't know how much I'm assuming it's the next topic with Trent Williams, spoilers, but I don't know how much that goes against the cap this year. But saving $16.4 million this year, when they already had like $33 million, they already had like top 5 in cap space. That tells me they are loading up, they're going to let it roll over, and they're going to front load Purdy. That's what I think. They're mortgaging for Purdy. And that's not a bad idea. I just think there comes a point where you do this, where you bring future money into a signing bonus. I'm pretty sure that's how that works. Eventually, you have to pay it up, because creating cap space now by paying money, like, it doesn't make sense, right? Because it's coming from the future. If I'm not mistaken, I could totally be wrong there, but I'm pretty sure that money's coming from the future. That's why it's dead cap hit for next year for Debo. In other words, that's why they shouldn't cut him next year, because it's like, well, now we're paying him $36 million or $28 million to not be on the roster next year? No way, right? But the other option could be maybe in doing this, this might actually make his contract more interesting for other teams to trade for, because the Niners ate up the money. The other team doesn't have to eat up that money. The Niners already are. I could see that. I would say essentially they're kind of putting themselves in a win-win situation. Either Debo will be worth trading and getting a big, nice reward for, or either way they're paying him, might as well keep him, and that helps Purdy. And you have more money to spend on Purdy down the line. That makes sense to me. But I guess my counterpoint is just eventually with all these deals, Ayuk, Debo, Trent Williams, eventually you're going to have to pay it, right? And it's like, yeah, no, we're paying it. We are. Yes, but like eventually you have to be the Saints, So, you're in the Super Bowl window. It looks like you have at least a year, and then at some point you're going to have to pay a lot of money. And like you said, you're going to have that core four of Purdy, Ayuk, Boza, and Fred Warner. Everybody else that is gone, Kittle, and so forth, right? Charvarius Ward or whoever else that leaves, you might be paying for them when they're not on the roster. That's when it's going to suck, and it's going to be really gritty. So It's just a matter of when is that going to come.
Yep. Real quick, I do want to get to a couple of these comments. Fonzie asks, did you see when he said during the press conference, he's referring to Ayuk, that he made it more difficult than it needed to be? Seeing him say that gave me a reassurance that he's here for the team. So did you see that, Mike?
No, I don't. No offense. I don't usually watch Niners press conferences unless something like massive happens. Like, I was going to end this topic with just thank God it's done.
Yeah.
No offense.
I was going to say.
I was getting so over it.
I was going to say, I'm also just really glad that we're about to hit the point in the season where we can stop talking about all the money and start actually talking about football. And the fun stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. The business side is so messy. And like, what's funny is like every single person that ever talks about the business side of football never knows exactly what it is that they're talking about. Like even us, we're like, I might be completely wrong, but I swear the experts are like that too, where it's like, oh, they'll do a little maneuvering of the cap. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but they find a way to make it happen. And that's just, it's always a shit show. Every single time when people are talking about cap space and stuff like that. To me, I'm just like, all right, I want to see the good players on the field. I want to play football. And, I don't want my team to get, kind of screwed over financially, of course, but I don't always exactly compute, one-to-one how these restructures and all the dead cap money like actually affects the team. It's like, it's kind of beyond me. Like why I probably should, and I probably will learn it, but even the people who get paid to talk about this don't know what the hell they're talking about. So
yeah, I think the best sort of examples I could bring up of like teams having to eventually pay for what they've literally paid for. When Reggie McKenzie took over the Raiders after Al Davis passed, Al Davis was pretty notoriously bad with money at the end of his day or reign. And you had players like Michael Huff, Jamarcus Russell on his rookie contract, Tyvon Branch, Darren McFadden, a lot of guys. I think, did Lamar Houston get a big deal with us? Cameron Wembley, Carson Palmer was after that. Anyway, there were a lot of contracts, and Reggie McKenzie came in, and he just shat it all out. He just cut every single guy. You're gone, you're gone, you're gone. Sorry, tough. And then we sucked, right? And it was a rebuild. It was a rebuild, but what he did was he rebuilt the books, the financial books of the Raiders, and it allowed them to actually be able to afford re-signing players, like actually good players, like eventually Derek Carr, Khalil Mack. Didn't re-sign Khalil Mack. That was a whole different story because they rebooted and they rebooted, but whatever. The other example would be when Patrick Willis retired that offseason, of all of those Niner players just in one offseason, boom, gone. That was like the craziest, whoa, they're suddenly rebuilding that I've ever seen. And
That
usually it's a
was
regime
like
change.
overnight, dude. That
Yeah.
almost felt like overnight that everybody
Yeah.
was gone
It felt like in one day they announced like 7 people were cut or retired or whatever. It was like
or
that
leaving.
was
Yeah.
historically bad, but this usually happens with regime changes. And I would say it also usually happens when, I guess, one of two things: either the team underperforms or the team realizes, yeah, we're not gonna be successful in the long run as we currently sit, you know. And I think the optimistic aspect, I guess, what I'm getting to here for the Niners is, so long as you have Purdy, I think this organization is going to try to win. As long as you have Shanahan, I think this organization is going to try to win. And what I can see is just every year it's like keep kicking the can as long as Shanahan's here. That's what I see. Just like the Saints. And the last team I'll give an example of was when the Atlanta Falcons eventually got rid of Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. Like they ate that for like 2 whole seasons. And it was like massive cap hits. But then they eventually got out of it and they were able to, rebuild again. It takes time whenever you do eventually decide to eat that, and it sucks for the fans, but again, for me, as long as you guys have Purdy on a deal, which obviously that's coming up, I don't think they're going to just be like, well, time to, cut players and eat the money. I think with Shanahan and Purdy and Ayuk there and Boza, they're going to try to win all the time. So,
Yeah, no, I honestly, like I sort of named the 4 core players that, their future is kind of going to build off of. I feel like you can put a good team around those players and be competitive. And I even think like, with the Trent Williams contract that we're going to talk about, if he doesn't retire, he can kind of like, if he plays into his 40s or plays until he's 40, he can kind of like be one of the transitionary players, to
yeah.
I guess a lot of them would be transitionary players. Like Kittle's gonna, probably. I mean, it's hard to imagine Kittle on another team, but he'll be there until the 49ers get another good tight end who's able to replace him. It's just a matter of if they can find a good tight end, because last year they tried to do it and they drafted 2 tight ends and neither of them are on the team this year. So,
and that would be the other aspect to this is like, okay, when Kittle and Trent Williams and perhaps Travarius Ward and Juszczyk and McCaffrey are eventually off this team, like when they're off the team, like I don't think you can technically keep kicking that contract dead money away. Like you're going to pay for it probably the next year or the following, right? What the Niners need to do at that point is they need to have already drafted really well, because if you're going to be spending a bunch of money on players that aren't on the roster anymore,
you have to make up for it.
You're going to have less money to spend in free agency because you spent all your other money on the quarterback and the wide receiver and the linebacker and the defensive end, right?
Yeah.
You need to draft well. So, like, again, back to the Pearsall and Cowing thing is like, if they work out and Debo's not there eventually and you're still paying for Debo, at least you have 2 guys who could start and do really, really well. But they need to start drafting well on the offensive line, which they've done once, it looks like, this year with your right
Dominic
guard.
Puny.
I'm forgetting Dominic Puny. But, eventually they're going to need a left tackle. They're going to need a right tackle. They're going to need a left guard, a center, right? So, defensive end, right?
Yeah. And then sort of to bring it back to, Fonzie's question, I did see that he said that during the press conference, and I know I've seen it like a couple times on Twitter. Let me know if I'm lagging, by the way, because I'm getting the Wi-Fi symbol and it's been a little spotty during the day. But yeah, I saw that, and I kind of figured that he was making it a little bit more difficult, but I'm kind of glad that he like admitted it and like was like, yeah, I probably like he probably admits to his sort of wrongdoing a little bit, and just being able to joke around about it. I think there's something endearing about that. So I mean, I just wish that he wasn't a little bit more difficult and he could have been at training camp. And I wish the 49ers would have just gotten this out of the way back when extensions were available, so they didn't have to pay him 30 million. Like, they probably could have gotten it done with 27 and a half, but today's price is not the same as yesterday's price, so Joel says, what up, Joel? Welcome back. And Joel says that he doesn't like when players miss time, because it makes a huge difference. I agree. Like I said with Nick Bosa last year, he didn't have the same year that he had the year before, and I think a lot of that you can attribute to him just not being on the field during training camp, and like it makes a difference. Like, makes a huge difference. I feel like the NFL Players Association should try and they have to do something about this, because every single offseason, there's players that like hold out, and it's been like this for a little while. I just, I wonder if there's a way that they can avoid it, because these players get paid and then they are not in football shape. They haven't been like getting their bodies used to actual like real contact, and then they get injured. It happens way too often. They need to do something seriously. And Fonzie says, I was at the point where I was like, trade his ass. I told Mike on the phone, we were talking, and I said, if Ayuk doesn't want to sign an extension and Pittsburgh is only offering like draft picks, I was like, what I want the 49ers to do, if they can't get like a good deal in return, I was like, just let him sit out. And I was like, if he's not going to agree to a deal, just let him sit out. If he's not going to play the entire year, all right, fine. You're getting fined all this money, and then franchise tag him and just keep him here until like his price would then go down. Like, it was getting to a point where I feel like the 49ers had leverage to where, if he did sit out for potentially 3 years, he's not getting a massive extension at all. So he almost had no choice but to sign with the 49ers. But are the 49ers really going to do that? Like, that would probably screw up their Super Bowl window over what, a couple $1 million. So just pay him. He's earned the money. He's a great player. He is the correct wide receiver to choose going forward. Don't choose both. That's the wrong. Choosing both Ayuk and Debo, I think, is the wrong choice. I think choose Ayuk. You can replace Debo. That's just how I feel. I don't feel like Debo is a great route runner. Hopefully Ricky Pearsall is a great route runner, and then you pair two great route runners with Brock Purdy, change the offense a little bit, and then you don't need to be so gadget heavy with Debo. I get that it defenses kind of had to adjust where if you get Debo the ball, he's really hard to tackle, but that style of play is not sustainable long-term in the NFL. And you see it season after season. Besides 2021, Debo's been like banged up every year. And besides maybe 2019. So, yeah. And Fonzie says Purdy's the most important one for the next few seasons. Mike, did we talk about this on the phone too? Where I feel like Purdy is irreplaceable when it comes to Super Bowl run. Like, if any other player on the team got hurt,
Yeah, last week.
Yeah, if any other player on the team got hurt, I think they would still have a chance to win a Super Bowl. But if Purdy's hurt, I don't think there's any chance. I don't think you're going to win a Super Bowl with Brandon Allen or Josh Dobbs, or did they get Tanner Mordecai back? I don't even know.
Practice squad.
Yeah. With every major piece locked in for the next 3 to 4 years, our cap will be okay. Yeah, they'll figure it out. They always do. Supposedly they offered. I probably said 27.5 million earlier. Pittsburgh offered more, and he turned that down too. I think the thing is the trade with Pittsburgh. It was up to the 49ers. Pittsburgh and Ayuk had an extension that they agreed on, and the 49ers and Pittsburgh had terms that they agreed on. But I think the 49ers just decided, you know what, we're not going to do that. We're going to try one last time to get this extension done. And then they made that final offer, and then it ended up just getting done.
I think what I had seen was that they wanted a receiver in return, in large part, I assume, because they're in a Super Bowl window. They need like a route running specialist, right, to replace Ayuk if you can't have Ayuk. And right now, Pearsall's nowhere to be seen. That was before he got shot. So the rumor or reporting is that the Niners sought out Courtland Sutton from the Broncos. Hey, we're getting a second and a third from the Steelers. We'll give you that third for Courtland Sutton. The Broncos said no. That's the reason why it didn't happen. If that's true, thank your lucky stars, Niner fans. Oh, my God. Courtland Sutton all you got in return for Brandon Ayuk, 1 second-round pick and Courtland Sutton. Probably a 2-year rental at best at wide receiver. If that's really what they were thinking, overpaying him, just simply paying him $30 million a year, oh my goodness. And at that, like bringing in Courtland Sutton like 2 weeks before the season, that great idea. Great idea. So it really worked out. Man.
I mean, here's what I'll say is, Sutton could have been fine. He wouldn't have been as great of a receiver in this offense as Brandon Ayuk is. But next year, I feel like the idea is that you could probably draft Ayuk's replacement with that second-round pick. Although you could argue Ricky Pearsall is supposed to be Ayuk's replacement or insurance. I don't know what the plan is now. I hope the plan, like I said, is to have 2 great route runners to pair with Purdy. And Fonzie says, man, all this time and we haven't seen a Debo. There's been and there are many great route runners. That is true. We definitely, if you asked anybody how many players are like Brandon Ayuk, there's a surplus of players who are similar skill set to Brandon Ayuk. And if you asked how many players are like Deebo Samuel, a select few. What I will say is just because Deebo is unique doesn't mean that you can't shift the offense away from his uniqueness, because, all right, him playing so unique, when he does inevitably go down with his physical play style, you can't really replace that, and then it throws the offense kind of out of whack. Whereas if you get 2 just great standard, I guess typical wide receivers instead of gadget kind of players, then I feel like the offense can sustain an injury or two and still function. Like last year, Deebo went down in the Browns game. The 49ers went on a 3-game losing streak. Trent Williams also went down at the same time, but the offense wasn't the same. Brock Purdy got a concussion at that time too, but it's so harder to adjust, and they don't use him for the amount of money that they pay him, because ever since they got McCaffrey, Deebo doesn't line up at running back anymore. There's just no need. All right, all this time and we haven't seen a Deebo. McCaffrey is like a finesse version of Deebo. He can catch the ball. He can. We saw it in the Super Bowl. McCaffrey lined up in the slot, but I know Deebo's not a slot receiver, but still, McCaffrey can line up and be a receiver if he needs be, but he's not the type to be as physical as Deebo. But I digress. Let's talk about Trent Williams. the 49ers were able to restructure Trent Williams' contract today. Let me pull up the tweet.
Sounds like more like an extension. No?
It's sort of, I guess the term that the NFL uses here via Mike Garafolo is 49ers left tackle Trent Williams restructure 3-year, 82 million. Yeah, $82.66 million, includes $48 million fully guaranteed.
So I'm assuming he was already on 3 years, and they just added on guarantees and whatnot.
He was at least under contract for at least 2 more years. So I don't know if they just added another year and restructured it. Like I said, dude, this contract stuff is so it's a huge headache all the time. Yeah. I want to talk about football, but I think as long as Trent Williams does not retire, this is the only correct move to make. And as long as the 49ers get a Super Bowl out of it, it was worth it. You know what I mean? They won't have to, in theory, worry about left tackle for 3 years. That's if doesn't retire, stays healthy, and doesn't regress. But he's like the best left tackle that we've seen in this generation. So, you know, I would rather have Trent Williams at like 80% than a lot of offensive linemen at 100%. So if he does regress a little bit, I don't know. But that's another thing. What took so long with this? Like, you're trying to build a Super Bowl team. The team's got to be together in order to build the chemistry, and also to be in shape when the season comes. This was a huge mess by the 49ers this whole offseason.
You know, honestly, I definitely see the viewpoint of like, this is a big mess for the Niners, and I can agree to that, like from the outside looking in. But I will admit, and this is coming from a Raider fan here, it does take two to tango when it comes to contract disputes. And I remember hearing like, you know, the Niners have, you know, given an offer to Brandon Ayuk like early August. And then like 3 weeks later, it was like the same offer is still on the table. I don't know if they ever upped their offer. I don't know if anybody's confirmed that. So
according to Schefter, it's the same offer that the Niners have had since August 12th.
So who's to say that Ayuk wasn't just sitting back going, I'm good. I don't want to go to training camp. Then it's not on the Niners. It's on him. And the same could be said for Trent Williams. And then this is one thing I saw was that Trent Williams at his press conference, I didn't watch it, I saw a tweet, said, yeah, Ricky Pearsall getting shot made me really want to be back with the guys and, you know, to help lead this team and, you know, to be there for everybody. So it sounds to me like it was him going, I don't want to be there right now. And then it took a big moment for him to be like, all right, let's ink this so I can get back in there. That's what it feels like to me. It's just these players going, all right, I'm going to sit on this offer until it's a week away from the season.
Here's my rebuttal. For why the 49ers are, you know, they do play a part in why they're at fault. The 49ers every single year sign their guys at the last possible moment. It's a trend, and I think Brandon Ayuk got offered that final offer on August 12th, reportedly, you know, from Schefter, or August 10th, whatever the date was. The 49ers did not up their offer, and then he decided to take it. I think because Ayuk, since he's smart and his agent is smart, they figure, you know, if we just sit on this, they might feel pressured and just, you know, bump it up a little bit more, because that's what they've done in the past.
That's exactly my point, though. Like, the Niners are sitting there and they're going, no, we're comfortable with this. And they just wait it out. Fine, you don't want to come back? We're not going to up our offer. And the player waits until the end, hoping that the team does. And maybe in Bosa's case, maybe in Debo's case, that they did. But it sounds like in these two cases, they didn't. And that's a win for the Niners, if that's true. But I'm not an insider, so I don't know. But from the outside looking in right now, that's what it kind of feels like to me.
Yeah, I think about this, like, why did it take so long to get to a number that Ayuk was okay with accepting? Why didn't they try to get ahead of this?
It should
Because
have been a year ago.
it should have been a year ago.
Yes.
Absolutely. And it would have been
That would be
much
the issue.
cheaper.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So they honestly, I don't know why they don't try and get ahead of these things. Because I don't know. I was sitting here. I'm a fan, and I was telling everybody on this podcast, Brandon Ayuk is going to have a breakout year. And the 49ers couldn't like
Listen to
all they
you.
had to do was listen to me, but they
Right.
couldn't like gauge that themselves that Brandon Ayuk was going to have the best year of his career after having such a tremendous training camp. They should have pulled him into the office and like, hey man, let's get something done.
Yeah, but I guess, and I feel like I've talked about this on this podcast before, but like, I think players know, like a Trevon Merrick for the Raiders this year, or a Malcolm Kuntz. It's like, why the fuck would I settle based off of how I finally got better last season? Malcolm Kuntz, perfect example. It's like, oh, this guy suddenly he's a starting defensive end in the NFL. Cool. Malcolm Kuntz could settle for $15 to $20 million a year, or he could play his ass off, work his ass off, and get 14 plus sacks this season, and suddenly he's making north of $25 million. It's like betting on yourself is so much more worth it. Again, in this scenario, it takes two to tango. I don't. Maybe the Raiders just know, like, yeah, there's no reason for Malcolm Kuntz to accept a deal right now. We're not even going to try it. But who knows? Maybe they have reached out. Like, are you interested in resigning right now? Maybe it's a quick from their agent. No, because we know we're going to get paid way more next year. And what I was going to say right before you mentioned that, a year ago at this time you said, Brandon Ayuk is going to break out. I think that's the key to why the Niners didn't do it last year, is because he hadn't broken out yet. So why would he accept a deal at that point? And, if he hadn't broken out yet, then in theory, like you mentioned, he's been consistent. Yes, by like consistently getting better, that's good. But like if he was capped off at the end of last season and he got no better, let's say he had 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns, and he did the same exact thing this year, then he's not getting paid $30 million a year, But if they had paid him 26 last year, we'd be looking at it like, man, are you kind of just like didn't get any better? Like, did he get paid and just didn't care any? Like, there'd be a whole bunch of different thoughts to it where he broke out and it's like, all right, that's the expectation. We're going to pay you.
Well, didn't last year or 2 years ago Christian Kirk get like 24 million per year?
Yes, but that's free agency. That free agency is a shit show. That is highest bidder. Thank you very much. That Christian Wilkins, granted, Christian Wilkins, I think he's a great player. And it's rare that you get one of those players that I think are franchise players to actually hit the market. And the reason why is because the Dolphins had like 3 other franchise guys that they needed to take care of,
Yeah.
So when that happens, yeah, bid like crazy. And the Raiders did. They paid up for Christian Wilkins. But yeah, Christian Kirk, it's like teams like the Jaguars where they just every year they have a shit ton of money to spend. It's like, well, we do need an X receiver. Fuck it, 24.5 or 26, 27 million. Why not? It's like, well, I could give you a couple reasons why not, but sure, fill your void,
Yeah, so I guess you bring up a good point. That's free agency, but now that is the market, right? That is the market for.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, at that time, that was the market, and then that was probably 2 years ago.
Fortunately
And
for Christian Kirk.
yeah,
Yeah.
but so my thing is I guess what is the smart thing to do? And I guess there's no right or wrong answer on what the correct thing to do is. But if you're Brandon Ayuk, and the 49ers offer you an extension similar to Christian Kirk's, the year before, how could you say no to that, knowing that any given play on the football field could end your career? How could you say no to guaranteed money? I get it. betting on yourself, and it worked out for Brandon Ayuk because he got more money.
Right.
But how can you say no to generational money when if God wants the snap of his fingers, it's gone.
My question to that would just be, was he in a predicament where they were talking contract last year? Because if they had contractual ownership of him, see, that's the point. If they weren't talking contract, then there's no question to be had, Now, if they were talking contract, then yes, it's a matter of, well, do I want to risk it or not? Like, I remember when Debo, now granted, Debo was coming off of his insane season, right? That's when he was trying to get his contract. That makes sense. He broke out, and it's like, I play the position way differently than most. I'm at a high risk of getting hurt. I'm not coming out of this offseason without a deal. And it worked for him, But if one side isn't trying at all to talk contract, there's no question to be had. It's just, well, I got to play better, at that point. Or else you're going to get fifth-year option, franchise tagged. He played better. Look at him now. He's set.
Yes. In retrospect, he made the right decision.
Yeah.
But it's always hindsight, right? If he had gotten hurt and there were those contract negotiations being had the season before, which has happened before, where players turn down a contract and then they get hurt. It happens. So I don't know. I know a lot of players, they bet on themselves, and a lot of the time it does work out. So that's why it's always good to I also think too, part of the reason why Ayuk broke out was because he was anticipating the payday. But like I said, it's always risky. But I think we're ready to move on to our next topic. What do you think, Mike?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about the Grant Cohn report. Grant Cohn, friend of the show, dropped kind of I would say a little bit of a bombshell today, from a source that he has, and he trusts the source. I trust Grant, Grant was just on the show last week. It would have been great if he had this scoop, and would have brought it to our show this week. But Grant this morning went on, he posted a video on Twitter and on YouTube, sort of talking about what he's hearing from his source is that the front office is unhappy with the amount of money that the 49ers have been spending on their players. Because they just keep extending players, and, I guess we don't know exactly what goes on behind closed doors of these contract negotiations, who steps in and who says, you know what, I get that it's a steep price, but we have to pay it for such and such player. But so essentially, the front office is unhappy with John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan for the money that's being spent. And this year is apparently a Super Bowl or bust year. And if they do not win the Super Bowl, heads will roll. So I don't know. I heard that, and I'm like, my instant reaction is, damn, that's a hell of a report, because Grant isn't typically a guy who breaks news. Grant is more of, he's a journalist. He'll get the information and give his opinion on it, right? He'll analyze it, give his opinion on it. He's not like, I would say, Adam Schefter, or a guy who is typically, I'm just not used to it. I'm not used to him breaking stuff like this, right? And I've been watching him for years. What I will say is, do I think it is believable? Yeah, I can believe it. We've been talking about it for years. At a certain point, where did the 49ers stop paying all these players? And when do they have, when are they going to bring home the Lombardi trophy? Because I could just imagine Jed York is sitting there like, I keep writing all these checks. I've written so many checks in the past week, for like big checks for Ayuk and for Trent Williams. And, there's no Super Bowl to show for it. Right. And the further along we get, the more likely that the Super Bowl is going to show up decreases because the team is getting old. The core that is Super Bowl worthy is no longer going to be Super Bowl worthy at a certain point. So I guess when I hear this and knowing that Kyle Shanahan is under contract until 2027, could Jed York be making, the move that he made a couple years ago when he decided to part ways with Jim Harbaugh? I don't know if when Grant said that heads are going to roll, my mind doesn't immediately go to Kyle Shanahan. It goes to John Lynch. But I think if you fire one, you should fire both. If you're going to fire one, you should fire both.
Is there a guy in the front office that is in charge of contracts?
Parag Marathe. And he's been with the 49ers for 25 years.
That would possibly be the guy.
See, I don't know. He's been here longer than John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have been here.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think yes.
He's the guy trying to save the money. He's the guy who's trying to save the money. He's one of York's guys, not one of Shanahan and Lynch's guys.
Because that sounds a lot like, I believe it's Tom Delaney for the Raiders. I could be totally mistaking his name for somebody else, but there's a finance guy, cap space sort of guy with the Raiders, and he does a great job. And I don't know. I guess my head just went towards him because if ownership or front office, whoever, has an issue with the way that the Niners are suddenly like, oh, you got to keep kicking the can, and we're front loading or whatever it is, we're loading up on this top heavy team, but we're kind of lacking at least a little bit in depth. If this ends up biting us in the ass, heads will roll. Maybe it's the people in charge of paying these players, which, to your point, I think it does most likely point towards John Lynch in the sense of like, well, he's the one who's making the calls on, how much to pay these guys, I guess, and who to draft. And if he's not drafting well and you have this top heavy roster, I can definitely see the reasoning. It's just, I think you and I might have our differences on our opinion of Kyle Shanahan. I think mine would be, as long as Purdy is your quarterback, like if Purdy gets extended, just, keep Shanahan and Purdy on the same contract length because they're hand in hand. If you take Shanahan out, I'd be really curious to see how Purdy plays.
Yeah, and I guess that's going to be a big question that we'll kind of have, hopefully never have to answer. Hopefully, this thing works itself out. The 49ers win a Super Bowl, but like I said, the further we get along, the less likely it becomes. I really feel like last year was probably their best bet to win it. But every year is a new year. We'll see how the 49ers can bounce back this year. Do you want to know what this report, sort of like the image that pops into my head? Do you want to know, like, and this will be big spoiler alert. I'll give you guys 5 seconds. If you have not seen Breaking Bad, you have 5 seconds to mute, so that way there's no spoiler. And I'll try to keep it as spoiler free, but if you've seen it, you'll know the exact scene. But there's a scene where Gustavo is in the lab, and Walt and Jesse are also in the lab, and they're sitting down, and Gustavo has a box cutter knife, right? I don't think in this situation, Jed York is Gustavo Fring. I don't think Jed York is in a position right now to move on from Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. Do I think that the pressure is? I do think there is merit. The pressure is increasing on them, because it's like at a certain point as an owner, you have to think, man, this is just going in circles. But when he says heads are going to roll, I mean, I just think about like that scene in Breaking Bad where Gustavo just executes one of his guys, in order to prove a point to Walt and Jesse.
Yeah, honestly, I could see the guy being executed, being John Lynch, and the Walter White and Jesse Pinkman in the scenario being Kyle Shanahan, of being mortified and like, I'm next if I don't get this right. Yeah, I could see that for sure.
Yeah, but like I said, if you fire one, they came as a pair. I don't know, dude. Like,
they came as a pair, but didn't Shanahan like Shanahan handpicked John Lynch, right?
Yes.
So who's to say Shanahan can't handpick another guy?
Well, he messed up on the first guy that he handpicked, and it took 8 years to realize that wasn't the guy.
Yeah,
you get what I mean?
I think. Yeah, I think there's plenty of options of like guys with like GM experience or assistant GM experience, whereas John Lynch didn't have any, and he's made it work pretty damn well for not having any experience as far as being nearly a GM, But maybe if there were to be a next guy, it could be somebody who has a little more experience with that, and maybe that works really well.
Yeah. Here's what I'll say too. And I guess this has me feeling very mixed because I've been very outspoken about my issues that I've had with Kyle Shanahan in the past, and how I have been like a broken record saying he needs to grow in certain areas as a coach in order to win a Super Bowl. But like, the thought of Jed York actually stepping in and firing him, I just don't think that like right now is the correct time to do it, because at the end of the day, the team is still winning a lot of football games. I think the correct time to do it is when they're not. If there's a season where they miss the playoffs, that is when it's time to make a decision. Not, I don't know. This stuff kind of coming out is like, it's just kind of weird. Like, is Jed York going to blow it up again? With the whole Jim Harbaugh situation. Amin the Dream, welcome back to the channel. Amin, it's been so long since we spoke. He says, I think the move with Harbaugh was more of he had issues with Harbaugh and their relationship was strained. I think the issues were really a lot with Harbaugh and Trent Baalke, because I don't think Harbaugh wanted Trent Baalke anymore. And then this is more of a, Jed York. He said after the NFC Championship game, he came out and was like, he talked to the media, which I have my issues with what he said in the, in that press conference. But, he came out and he said if the 49ers would have lost to the Lions, it still would have been a successful season. And now I'm here, I'm hearing this stuff and, about the, the report didn't say that John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan are about to get fired. That's not what the report was saying. It was just they're very unhappy with the team spending. And ultimately, they have to spend because they haven't drafted well. Like, maybe the 49ers don't have to pay Trent Williams top of the line dollar if they would have drafted his replacement and had forward thinking. But this regime doesn't have great forward thinking. They are always in the now, right? Like when they moved up to get Trey Lance, they didn't think about all the, first round picks that they were going to be mortgaging in order to spend it on one guy, only for them to fall out of love with that guy. They're investing a lot into certain players, and there's no Super Bowl to show for it. I think that is an issue. But okay, so going back to what I was saying about the whole Jed York thing, he said it would have been a successful season even if they lost the NFC Championship. I think, knowing what we know now, I think it's financial. And here, let's. Amin says the stadium is sold out. Merchandise sales are going well. They're contenders, quote unquote contenders, every year. And even if they don't win again, will Jed have the guts to fire Kyle, or does he even want to? It is kind of like, it makes you think. I just wonder if Jed York thinks that they have built, the 49er brand back up to where maybe, I think they're going to keep Shanahan and Lynch. I honestly do. Even if they don't win a Super Bowl, I think, that I think they're here at least for another 2 years. That's honest. It's honestly what I believe.
Yeah, I think the whole thing where I was getting at earlier of like, when you're kicking the can, and cool, you have your core 4 young guys, right? But if your talent surrounding them is not sufficient enough to sustain a season full of wins and to get you to an NFC Championship and stuff like that, that's on the GM. Or maybe you could say it's on the coach. I don't know. To me, if I'm realistic, if I'm Jed York and I'm looking at it and I really have to say, like, who the hell do I have to blame for this? Like, what is the problem here? What's going on? Like, what I would see is, at least this is a little bit of projecting here, and also just my opinion of Kyle Shanahan. Again, I mentioned it and kind of hinted at it earlier. Like, you and I might have differences on Kyle Shanahan. My opinion is he is the coal to the train. He gets the engine going. He is the one that has this offense moving and humming and scoring points. Like, their roster is loaded with talent, and that obviously helps. But I think that he leads a high-scoring offense, whereas John Lynch is kind of, helping him get these top-heavy players, trading for McCaffrey, right? Re-signing the guys that actually do work out in Debo, Ayuk, trading for Trent Williams, right? And then keeping guys like Fred Warner and whatnot, right? Kittle, Juszczyk. Like, they have found their guys, a lot of them through free agency, and some of them, they got some late rounds like Kittle, right? But like Juszczyk, McCaffrey, and Trent Williams. You could argue all 3 of those guys are the best at their position in the NFL. All 3 of them came from outside the building. I just think if in 2 years from now, the kicking the can catches up to them, right? And they have this big contract for their rookie quarterback, or not rookie, but, young quarterback, the big contract for Ayuk, the big contract for this guy and that guy, and everybody else is gone in part because of those contracts. I'm blaming the GM if we are not successful, right? But I could totally see it going hand in hand of like, well, Shanahan, you're supposed to be this offensive guru. Like, where's the offensive guru? You have the quarterback, you have the receiver, you have Pearsall and Cowing. If you couldn't get it done, like, maybe his head rolls too. But I guess just projecting here, I would see it as if the roster construction is not sufficient, at least my assumption would be that would be the problem. John Lynch is the reason. John Lynch gets the head to roll.
Mm-hmm. Amin brings up, a good point that, I wish that I could have verbalized a little bit better, but I think I was getting there. Amin says, you're not wrong, but with this roster, if you're not winning year after year, is it a player thing? Because we know the team is good enough to win the Super Bowl, or is it a Kyle and John issue? And I think that's probably where the displeasure comes from, because the 49ers have the most they have the most expensive team, right? Or at least they're loaded with like the most superstars year after year, right?
Mhm.
Why have they not won a Super Bowl yet? Where is the issue? They're spending all
Yeah.
this money on these stars and they're not getting the results that they're setting out to go get. They're not getting the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and to
So
that
I
point,
think that's where the displeasure is.
yeah, and to that point, in the complete opposite of what I just got done saying about it being on John, I can see the whole why haven't you won a Super Bowl yet be really pointed towards Kyle because I mean we just hit third time's a charm for him as far as choking in a Super Bowl. So yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Amin says, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Kyle chokes every year in the Super Bowl. And I'm not saying fire Kyle, but with bringing in another coach like Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator on the Lions, help this team finally get to the finish line. Yeah. Um, I think that's a good point, and that's questions that an owner should definitely have. And if he is, seriously questioning this, like I get it. They have such a stacked roster and they don't win. Why? A lot of people are quick to dismiss the report, and I think a lot of it, you know, it just has to do with 49ers Twitter in general can be. I'm not gonna lie. I'm a diehard 49er fan, but sometimes 49ers Twitter can be such a toxic, like, chamber of like people just kind of repeating the same thing and like almost trying to cancel people. Like it's a little much. Like I love the team, but sometimes, dude, like all right, people were really mad at Grant Cohn reporting this and like, essentially saying that he's pulling it out of nowhere and like, all right, I personally I trust Grant. This is what he is hearing. Grant is not speculating, right? This is a source that he has that is telling him this information. And even he was kind of surprised by it, right? I was surprised by it. That's why I'm kind of like all over the place when I'm even talking about it because it's kind of tough. It's a tough idea to wrap your head around. Like, Jed York, like potentially doing the whole Harbaugh thing all over again, right? Making possibly the same mistake twice. But like I think if you don't believe the report, and this is more of a 49ers Twitter topic at this point. If you don't believe the report, just ignore it. Go about your business. Grant's job is to, what he's doing is just letting us know what he's hearing from people who have knowledge, right? And if you don't want that knowledge, you don't have to listen to it. But he's letting everybody know. He's not saying, "Hey, I think this is happening." It's, "Hey, this is what I'm hearing." Right? So, if you don't like it, just keep scrolling. You don't have to like I saw people have been like attacking Grant all day about it. It's kind of crazy. Like if you're so upset by something like this, like I don't know, just like find something better to do in my opinion. Like you can be upset by the report itself, but like attacking the person who's reporting it, I think that's where I'm like, find something else. You know, it's just there's other things to waste your energy on. So, but that's enough of that. I do appreciate Grant for like, letting us know instead of just like keeping it to himself. Um,
Oh man, yeah, I there are a select couple of Raiders reporters. Uh One specifically, but I guess really it's probably two of them who not to hint here, but they work for the Athletic. Sometimes they'll tweet shit where it's like, "Oh, roster news incoming," or like I remember when the cutdowns were happening and fuck it, Vic Tafer tweeted like, you know, yeah, they're keeping 4 defensive ends or just something like that, like something like he already saw it, and it was like, well, why are you waiting? Like, okay, I don't know. It's just sometimes he withholds information when he clearly tweets like, "I have information. I know what's coming." Da 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 da, and just like dangling it in front of us. It's like, well, then fucking tell us if you're the insider. Super annoying.
Well, sometimes they can't. Sometimes they can't.
I'm
Like when
and I
they're told
assume
stuff
that
off the record, you know,
right.
and
But
they're
at
just so
that point,
excited. Like, yeah.
though, don't tweet that because that just riles us up. That's just yeah. Anyways,
Mm.
I think we're
Yeah,
ready for the next topic.
I agree. We're ready for the next topic. But real quick, Amin says, thanks for answering the question and reading the comments. We'll definitely be tuning in during the season. Go Niners. Yeah, no, that's what we do here. Everybody else who's watching, if you guys want to be a part of the show and share your thoughts, we read comments. Even if we're not live, we reply to comments, and we try to do our best to do it in a timely manner. So we're going to be live every single week talking about every single game that the 49ers and the Raiders play. So, yeah, let's go ahead and talk about the 49ers facing off finally in a regular season game against the New York Jets. We're not talking about contract stuff anymore. We're talking about actual football. We're not talking about preseason, people making rosters. No, this is week 1, Monday Night Football, prime time. Aaron Rodgers is coming to Santa Clara to get his ass kicked once again. Yeah, man. He's going to be facing off against Leonard Floyd, who just a year ago tore his Achilles. Well, not Leonard Floyd tore his own Achilles, tore Aaron Rodgers' Achilles when he tackled him.
Interesting.
Right?
Wow. Huh.
Yeah. So Leonard Floyd, I think, was talking to Adam Schefter recently about that. And I guess New York Jets fans made death threats to Leonard Floyd. And Leonard Floyd remembers that. And he said he's using that as motivation for this game. Mike, how are you feeling about the 49ers versus the Jets? I have my opinion on who I think is going to win, but I want to hear from you. Like, what are your overall, like, what's your first impression when you think about it?
Well, they have a great boundary corner in
Sauce
Gardner.
Gardner.
And you have Ayuk coming off of this contract dispute. You have Trent Williams coming off of this contract dispute. And I saw that there might have been an update today on Hassan Reddick, but I didn't read it. I don't know if they figured out the contract, or I feel like that would have been bigger news. So I don't know if he's still holding out, if he's planning on not playing, or what's going on with him. But he would greatly help their pass rush for the Jets. But regardless, the Niners have Trent Williams, and assuming he's ready day one, which I would expect, I think the left side will be protected. You got, Puny at right guard, so, I mean, he's going to have his hands full along with the center and potentially probably the left guard with
Quinnen Williams.
Quinnen Williams, baby.
Hey, real quick, how crazy would it be if Hassan Reddick was actually going to play in this game? I don't think he's going to play in this game because I don't think that the contract negotiation has really gone anywhere between him and the Jets. But so you would have Hassan Reddick on one side of the football going against Brock Purdy. Hassan Reddick is the one who tore Purdy's UCL. And then on the other side of the football, you would have Leonard Floyd going against Aaron Rodgers. And, he's the one who knocked Aaron Rodgers out last year.
Yeah. I mean, for all we know, it's a Monday night game. They might get the contract done Saturday.
Yeah. I mean, they could, but, similar to the questions I guess we have about whether or not Trent Williams, whether or not Brandon Ayuk are going to start out a little bit slow, we would probably also have those same questions with Hassan Reddick, because we saw it last year with Nick Bosa. He got signed literally right before Pittsburgh week 1, and then got off to a slow start last season. So, I guess we'll see with those guys. Other than that, I honestly think this game is going to be kind of close. Honestly,
I hope it is.
Because I think the Jets, I think Robert Saleh is coaching for his head coaching career. This might be the only head coaching opportunity that he ever gets, right? And, unfortunately for him, he's in such a tough market in New York. But yeah, the 49ers are going to be maybe a little bit rusty with those, players that we mentioned, Ayuk and Trent Williams. I want to see if the 49ers are able to run the ball against this defensive line, even without Hassan Reddick. Is McCaffrey going to be 100% with his calf? I just don't want them to push McCaffrey. You know what I mean? Like the entire offense ran through him last year. It was like designed to go through McCaffrey, and that was like 90% of the offense. I want to see if maybe this year they can try and preserve him a little bit and put the ball into Jordan Mason's hands a little bit more, because I think Jordan Mason might be a little bit better of a runner, going straight up the middle, halfback dives up the A gap, in the B gap. But Christian McCaffrey definitely is like, I think he would be great as long as he's 100% healthy, which I hope that they're not rushing him back. On the other side of the football, we're going to see Breece Hall. Is he going to be a problem for this 49ers run defense? That will be a big question that will be solved, because the 49ers are going to be they've already transitioned to a brand new defensive coordinator in Nick Sorensen. Is Nick Sorensen going to have the answer in order to be able to stop, the run game from hurting the 49ers? I know last year the 49ers played a style of football to where they were able to, they essentially were giving opposing offenses the ability to run the football a little bit, but the 49ers were scoring so many points on offense to where if the other team is going to run the ball and pick up small chunks, guess what? The 49ers were just going to score again, and it was going to be like an inevitable game of catch up that they were not going to be able to catch up with the 49ers with. That's the style of football the 49ers played a lot last year. I think that's the kind of style that Kyle Shanahan likes to play. I think he likes to play the whole time of possession game and, really kind of go up on teams early. If the 49ers get up early in this game, I do think that they will probably win this game. I don't know, because we would have those big question marks about the run defense, but are the Jets going to be able to afford to run the ball against this 49ers team who likes to, get off to a lead and then run out the clock? How do you think Breece Hall is going to do Monday night? You're muted.
That's the thing with it being week one, is like I'm forgetting how a lot of defenses were last season. Like I'm forgetting like was the Niners defense really great against the run or the pass, or both last year?
Last year they were pretty good against the pass. Obviously they had like their slip ups here and there, but Charvarius Ward and Deommodore Lenoir were very good last season. I guess the big question mark this year is going to be who is going to fill in and really step up in absence of Dre Greenlaw, and how big is that going to be also, in terms of the run defense?
Yeah, I think Breece Hall is very good. I think the Jets beefed up their offensive line, and they're coming in week one with a healthy offensive line. Whereas, this is a very old offensive line. I could see as the season progresses, the Jets, just projecting here, the Jets having maybe some injury issues on the line. But week one, I don't expect that, right? So in theory, it's 100% fresh versus a team who's coming off of a loss in February where, like you just mentioned, Dre Greenlaw, unfortunately tears his Achilles. This seemed on paper, this is a tight game. The Jets, again, on paper, look like they might have the best defense in football. Like if everything goes right for them, at least a top 3 unit, up there with like the Niners and Cowboys, right? And I would say so long as Rodgers is healthy, their offense should be far, not even funny how much far superior their offense should be this season. I know Brees Hall was getting a lot of dump off passes last year because they had shitty quarterback play. Whereas this year, I think Garrett Wilson is going to be a problem. And I think if I were in a position in fantasy football to pick Garrett Wilson, I'd be happy to.
Speaking of fantasy football, Mike, not to cut you off, but I did want to mention I do think this is going to be a big week for Deebo Samuel because I mean Sauce Gardner I think is going to be a problem for a guy like Brandon Ayuk who has not been at training camp. So this could be a Deebo game for the 49ers.
Yep, Deebo, my 3rd round pick in fantasy football. I'm expecting 200 yards, 8 catches, 2 rushing touchdowns, 3 receiving touchdowns this week. No, but I am hoping for Deebo to have a nice, very good start to the season for my fantasy team. And obviously, what's cool about this pod is I'll get to root for him every week on here. And I was kind of getting to that with like the Sauce Gardner part, at the very beginning. Like I can see Ayuk having a pretty rough one, but Deebo being like the number 1 receiver in this game for the Niners. And my question really lies with McCaffrey. I know he's practicing this week. Is he going to be held back at all? Like you mentioned, Jordan Mason. That's a perfectly fine plan. But again, that Jets defense is solid. If they stop the run, all of a sudden it's like, well, if Ayuk is getting shut down and it's just Deebo and a not quite so 100% McCaffrey, can the Niners offense get it done against this defense? Whereas, the Niners defenses should be set up well in this game too, but you got Aaron Rodgers coming into town, and I think he probably has a chip on his shoulder after last season. And a beefed up offensive line. It's a very interesting matchup, and I very much look forward to this game because it's a Monday night game in large part. It's going to be a very interesting game. If I had to pick a team to win right now, it would have to be the Niners. I think I would have to pick the Niners. But it's close. It's very close.
Yeah, no, I'm just remembering now that last year I picked the 49ers for every single game. I'm also going to pick the 49ers. And the reason why is because I brought up how the 49ers like to play from ahead and then milk the clock after. They have a very good opportunity to get ahead early in this game, so long as the offense is ready to go from the jump. Because I anticipate that the Jets are going to have to get a little bit used to, playing with Aaron Rodgers because he has played 4 snaps of football in like 2 years now. He didn't play any preseason. He really does not have a lot of experience playing with a lot of these players on the Jets. So I guess it's still yet to be seen how well they can mesh together. But I do agree the Jets offense is going to be way better this year than it was last year. I do think this is going to be a hard-fought game. And I don't anticipate it'll be a blowout. I think both teams are too good. I think a lot's at stake for the Jets. A lot's at stake, especially for Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas. So, I think they're able to get that message across. And unless Aaron Rodgers does not particularly care for Robert Saleh, I don't know. Well, I guess we'll see how it plays out. But
I think
there's a lot riding for him.
Yeah, I almost picked the Jets here, just because the Niners don't quite feel as at 100% as the Jets do. And I think the Jets can come in pretty hot mentally as far as like, we got something to prove this year. Like we had our off year, we had our injured year. It's time to come out here and play for real. I can see it for the Jets 100%. I think the reason why I'm leaning Niners is simply because, well, first off, they're still a Super Bowl caliber team, and we haven't seen that from the Jets. But also, the Niners are playing at home. So I'm going with house money here.
Yeah, the 49ers are playing at home. I will say, though, like, on the other side of things, if the 49ers were to lose this game, I do think, like, you know, not we wouldn't be hitting the panic button, but a lot of questions would come up of like, man, is this going to be a Super Bowl hangover year?
Yeah.
You know,
I can see the slow start. I could see it writing itself right now with the Ayuk and Trent Williams, McCaffrey's calf issue. I can see it so easily where the Jets just this won't be a steamroll game. No team is getting steamrolled in this game, but I could see the Jets winning by 10 at the end of this and it being like, damn, that happened. Okay. I can see it.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely experienced something similar back like 4 years ago in 2020, the pandemic year. 49ers, I thought, had another chance to go back to the Super Bowl. I thought they were a super talented team, but sometimes you don't get lucky. I'm still picking the 49ers in this game, but it would not, I guess, shock me if something looks out of rhythm, because this entire offseason for the 49ers, I would say, has been out of rhythm. So, I anticipate they will come to play, but if they don't, it will reflect the offseason that they just had. Besides that, do you have any other last thoughts on 49ers Jets before we move on to Raiders versus Chargers?
Just go Debo. Go Debo.
I think does a fantasy football question here. Does Tyler have Kittle? Because I know he has Breece Hall.
Yeah, great question. Because obviously, in theory, Kittle could be the other guy that has a big game in this one. Actually, it would make a lot of sense. Let's see here. He does have George Kittle.
Yeah, so I'm gonna be. I take fantasy football pretty seriously, as you can see that trophy right there for 4-time champion in the past 6 years. Not to toot my own horn, as I do every single day, but man, it's gonna be such a weird watch for me if like my matchup with Tyler is close, because on both sides of the ball he's gonna have a player. I'm heavily going to be rooting against Breece Hall, especially if like the matchup is close. But man, on offense, Kittle's going to catch it. I'm going to be like, my girlfriend's family is going to be like, yeah, go. And I'm going to be like, no, just go down. Like, like, damn it, like under my breath. Right. But ultimately I want the 49ers to win. And if Kittle can just have a great game blocking, that would be fantastic. I was an offensive lineman. Love to block. Let's help out the big boys up front. All right. I think Brock has enough people to throw to. Mike, let's move on to the Raiders versus Chargers. It's finally come. We've spent all offseason talking about, the coaching situation. And I think we had it down to two candidates for the Raiders. It was either stick with Antonio Pierce, or in my opinion, consult Jim Harbaugh and see if he would come. And now we finally get to see the matchup between the two. It's funny that it's the first matchup, after we spent all that time talking about it, because it was a really big topic for us, right?
I think it was a pretty big. I mean, at the time when it was like, all right, who's going to be the Raiders head coach? I'd say day one, week one, yes, it was a big topic. But very quickly, probably before the season ended last year, I knew I was on board with Antonio Pierce. And, I appreciated that there was a tweet from Vic Tafur, I believe, that said, the Raiders did reach out to the Harbaugh agency, or whatever you want to call it. And it seemed like there was no interest there, in return from Harbaugh. So that, I think that's all you can ask for there, if that's true, right?
Yeah.
Granted, I will say, Harbaugh would have been a great choice. I think for the way that this team is built, he would have probably came in and fit in really well. It's just a matter of the quarterback, and I think that probably has a lot to do with where he sat, as far as being interested. Maybe the only team he was interested was the Chargers because of a guy named Justin Herbert. I could totally see that. Um, and the writing was kind of on the wall for the Chargers, like dating weeks before 2023's NFL season even ended. Uh, but regardless, yes, here we are.
How you feeling about the game, Mike?
Well, the vibes have certainly come down for me as far as the Raiders this season. We are coming off of the last time facing this team, beating them, was it 63-21?
Yeah.
Does that sound right? So, I mean, I probably shouldn't be that scared, right? It's just this is a new regime for them. This is a new coach. They're installing a new offense with Greg Roman. It sounds like it's going to be very run heavy, right? While still having that quarterback in Justin Herbert, who is coming off a plantar fasciitis or fascia, whatever you call it, injury. And he's still, I think, questionable right now. I'm assuming he's going to play just because he's practicing. But I guess on the Raiders side, it's like, the offensive playmakers, man, they are there. They are there and they are ready. It's just, will the quarterback be able to get it done? And, again, that's where my vibes have gone down this preseason and training camp is just, all right, well, Gardner Minshew does not sound like he's very accurate in training camp. And then we see the preseason. It's like, all right, that is confirmed. He is not very accurate. And then the defense, I'm not going to fault them too bad for not playing that well in the preseason, but that was supposed to be our strength coming in this year, along with the playmakers that the quarterback throws to. So it's like, if the quarterback sucks and he nullifies the playmakers and the defense takes a step down, this is going to be a rough one. Not just this week, but this entire season, So again, the vibes are low right now. And again, here we are versus Jim Harbaugh's Chargers in his first ever, game as the Chargers head coach. With Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins at running back, a slightly beefed up offensive line with the first round rookie at right tackle and Mr. Joe Alt. And they have, of course, the left tackle, Rashawn Slater, who's very, very good, like Pro Bowl, All Pro left tackle. They kept Joey Bosa.
No, I was just going to say, did you know that Joe Alt has a son?
Don't do this now. This would be extremely premature of you. Don't do that. They decided to keep Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. You're right. Joe Alt's son is Joey Bosa. I heard that he's been killing him in training camp, and I'm just kidding. But
no, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. For those of you wondering, we sort of joked around in our fantasy group chat like a couple months ago, and I think our friend who's a Chargers fan said it's going to be a long day for Max Crosby when Joe Alt lines up with him. And, I was just going to make the joke that Joe Alt has a son named Max. Mike's not having it at all. I know that Max Crosby is going to get his share. I know it.
I think Max Crosby is going to purposely line up against him. And, going up against Rashawn Slater and letting Kuntz go up against Alt is perfectly fine too. They'll probably just alternate. Honestly, that's what they do anyways. I'll just keep going. I mean, the Chargers kept their two defensive ends. I'm forgetting who their defensive tackle is right now. But they did get rid of the wide receivers. The wide receiver corps is much worse than last year on paper, although they did draft Lad McConkey. And then their defensive backfield, like, all right, they have Asante Samuel Jr. and they have Derwin James, but I don't know if Samuel played in that 63-21 ass whooping last season, but their defensive backfield did not look impressive at all against the likes of Trey Tucker and Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers and company. But that game did not include one Justin Herbert. And that's kind of the key for me, not only in this game, but just looking at the Chargers this season is like, I will, yes, Jim Harbaugh is a good coach. And if he can get his run game to work, which is a big question for me because his two running backs are guys who usually don't last a full season. Like Gus Edwards, yes, maybe, but that's usually when he's the second running back. If fucking J.K. Dobbins, and no offense, and I'm not trying to put anything on him here, knock on wood, but if he tears his Achilles a third time, you're not going to have J.K. Dobbins this year, and suddenly it's nothing but Gus Edwards, which is great for fantasy, but eventually it probably won't work for him either, And then who is it? Kamani Vidal? Sure, good luck with that, with your run-first offense. And then if you decide to become a pass-first offense, it's like, all right, have fun throwing to a rookie and a relative nobody in Josh Palmer.
Hey,
no offense.
Vidal is nice. Vidal is nice. I'm not gonna lie.
Vidal, I liked him in his college tape, but there was talk of him getting cut like a couple weeks ago. But he made the roster, and I think he rightfully did from what I've seen of him. But anyways, I'm going on for kind of too long here. I mean, it's week one. It's really tough. Again, the vibes are low. This is in LA. This is Jim Harbaugh's first game for the Chargers. Again, at home, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to continue with the emphasis that, the vibes are low for the Chargers.
Oh.
The Raiders are winning this game.
Oh, my. You are picking the Raiders?
I don't care what anybody says. The Raiders are not losing to the Chargers in this game.
Back on May 16th, you also picked the Raiders. I am going to explain my pick. I think, man, you mentioned that the vibes were low, and I think, you did end up deflecting that to the Chargers, but I think there are some low vibes right now with the Raiders and their quarterback situation. Antonio Pierce finished the season 5-4 last year, which, I mean, it's above 500. And you and I have had conversations about, the level of, like how impressive those wins were. Right. And I think I said, there was one win that I would probably consider pretty impressive, and that was the Chiefs. And the Chiefs were in a down year, and they still ended up winning the Super Bowl, funny enough. I am going to pick the Chargers to win this game because I think that Jim Harbaugh inherited more talent than people are giving credit to. I think that he's a hell of a coach. As long as Justin Herbert's plantar fasciitis isn't going to bother him week one and especially the whole season, I think the Chargers are going to be a pretty competitive team. And, a lot of people have kind of like just dismissed them, but I'd say there is a huge group of people who do expect the Chargers to make the playoffs, because of Jim Harbaugh. I think he's that good of a head coach. And if you ask me, you give Jim Harbaugh, Justin Herbert, and, you give them guys like Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, Asante Samuel Jr., Derwin James on defense. And, you take that and you face against a Raiders team that has sort of an inexperienced head coach. Like, say what you want. I like Antonio Pierce, but I will admit, I still need to see a little bit more from him before I can crown him like, one of the best head coaches in your division. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. He still has to prove it to me. I am going to go with the Chargers over the Raiders because I just think that if there's things that I know about the NFL, some of the biggest, factors are the head coach and the quarterback. The Chargers for sure have both. The Raiders might have one, might have both, maybe have neither. I know it's a team game. I think it will be close. If the Raiders win, I will be impressed, but I will be picking the Chargers. And if I'm wrong, I want all the Raider fans to call me a Raider hater and, type in the comments, and I'll eat my words and I will be impressed. So give me the Chargers. And afterwards, maybe Joe Alt can buy a bike for his son.
That's if Joe Alt survives the night. Listen, I was kind of playing around with my words before I picked the Raiders. Now I'll actually explain myself. I agree with the sentiment of the quarterback and, head coach aspect. And I think what the Raiders head coach does for them is, he helps them in playing hard for him, right? And I would just this is where I'm maybe a little wishful thinking based off of the preseason. I really hope the Raiders defense can come out flying snap number 1 of this game, because if they do, really the only thing that can hold them back is their quarterback. And we've talked about that before. Yes. I just think the Raiders are far, far, far more talented than the Chargers on paper.
No, I agree. I agree with that. So I'm not going to play the game. Oh, the Raiders just suck. No, I do think the Raiders are more talented on defense. Their defensive line is good.
And offense. The quarterback is the question, but on offense, the Raiders.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Okay.
I'm getting there. Let me get there. Their defensive line is nasty. Their, Trevon Merrick is pretty good. Their corners, maybe could use a little bit of help. I'm not in love with the Raiders linebackers personally. I think Spillane is pretty good, but I think they could use a little bit more help in that regard. On offense, the Raiders by far have the better weapons out of both teams. The only X factor is Justin Herbert, and I just have a lot of faith in Justin Herbert. We'll see. The plantar fasciitis thing maybe is a big deal, and it probably is, and maybe it'll play a big factor in the game. But look, I understand the Raiders have Devontae Adams. They've got Brock Bowers. They've got Zamir White. And, they've got a stable offensive line right now, right? I'd consider them stable. Not an elite offensive line. They're healthy. It's week 1. We're gonna see how is Jackson Powers Johnson gonna play? Is he starting left guard?
He is likely not starting. He's still kind of catching up to speed. It's gonna be Cody Whitehair at left guard, unless something changes.
So, in that sense, I like the offensive line of the Chargers more because I love the tackles. I love Joe Alt and I love Rashawn Slater. I want to say they're experiencing an injury on, one of their interior offensive linemen, but I'm forgetting who. But
that just screams Chris Wilkins to me, man.
Yes.
Man, I mean, I can't name you the Chargers starting defensive tackle. It's entirely possible he's really good. I can't name him off the top of my head. Am I discounting Khalil Mack a little bit? Probably. He's had great games against the Raiders, unfortunately. Joey Bosa, I'm at the point in this stage in his career where I just don't care. But he is a player. He's a guy on the field, and he makes plays. And if he's going against Thayer Munford, I'd expect him to maybe get a sack, I just think Joe Alt is this prospect who's supposed to be great. Great, 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 great. That's great. I think you have two insanely great, proven pass rush specialists going against him, whether it's Kuntz or Crosby. And God help him if it's Crosby. And I guarantee maybe around 50% of the plays, it will be Crosby. I can't wait. I can't wait.
I'm still picking the Chargers.
Yeah, no, I'm not trying to convince you. I expected no different in large part because of Harbaugh, and the quarterback situation definitely does have an effect. If Herbert were announced a week ago, like, yeah, he's probably not playing until week 2 or 3, yeah, I'm sure it would be different. And I would be much more confident in my pick here. I'm not like 100% confident. I'm mostly getting a little defensive here just because I just think if the Raiders can just play efficient on offense and Gardner Minshew, for the love of God, can throw accurate passes, they should win this game. It really should be that simple. It really should be.
I want to be clear. I think this game is a toss-up. I just favor the Chargers. I don't want to say – I'm not going to say that the Chargers are going to come out and blow out the Raiders. I don't see that. Similar to that 49ers-Jets game. Yeah, Mike is being attacked by a gremlin.
It seemed to be a moth.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm going to stick with my pick, and we shall see. It's the same pick that I made back in May, so maybe, for all I know, I'm believing what I want to believe. And then the Raiders will come, and they'll kick Charger ass. And then you are going to go straight to the group chat, and you are going to make fun of Tyler.
I will say Tyler has been saying that they're winning by 17 in this one. I also will say, like, looking at the schedule, you don't have to pull it up, but like the next 2 weeks are like Baltimore and Cleveland or something like that. I just think this is a very winnable game. This also, full offense, is going to be like a 50% home game for the Raiders. I just think they're in a position where they need to win this game. They need to come out hot. They need to come out and prove a little something, And I think the name to Harbaugh's game is running the ball, and I have zero belief in their current running back situation. That's paired against Christian Wilkins and the edge defenders, who Max Crosby, in my opinion, is the best defensive end against the run. And now you have Christian Wilkins in the middle. Like, that's the guy I keep forgetting about this entire offseason, the vibes are low. When I think of Christian Wilkins, it gives me hope, because that's the one thing I have never seen dating back to Khalil Mack on the Raiders of like, God, if we just had an elite defensive tackle who can rush the passer to pair with the elite defensive end, my God, this defense could be so much better. And it could help the defensive backs too. You got Jack Jones out there, right? We're going to have Jacorian Bennett out there, maybe a little bit of Darnay Holmes, who they just signed. You got, I believe, a breakout candidate in Trevon Merrick, and you have Marcus Epps playing safety. If Christian Wilkins is getting home like it looked like he was against the Vikings in the preseason, oh yeah. And speaking of plantar fasciitis, if that's going to affect Herbert, it's that he can't just go out of the pocket and start running around like he could before. If he's going to be stuck in the pocket, look out for Christian Wilkins and Max Crosby, and also, Malcolm Kuntz with the cleanup. So my opinion is this defensive line is going to be the difference of this game versus the run game versus the rookie offensive tackle. Give me the Raiders.
I'm sticking with the Chargers.
Yep. I'm glad you are.
Yeah.
Bring it.
No, I mean, Hey, at least we picked something different. One of us is going to be wrong, unless, dude. How upsetting would it be if they tied?
I don't know. We'll see how this season goes, man. I started with the whole the vibes are low thing, and it's not exactly not true. I don't know what to expect from this season for the Raiders. It's just this is a game for Harbaugh that I want to spoil for the Charger fans for the fans, and I'm sure a lot of the players too, they want nothing more than that get back. They were embarrassed the last time they faced us, right?
Yeah. And they do want that get back. I could see this being a game that Minshew loses for the Raiders by turning the ball over.
Yeah, and if he does, then I'm going to be sitting here next week saying, I told you guys so. Aiden O'Connell should have been the starter because when Aiden O'Connell faced this team, he put up 60-3. But am I expecting that every week? No, right? Is he going to do that ever again? Probably not. But yes, if that happens, if the Raiders lose this game, I would expect it to be similar to Jimmy Garoppolo week 2 against the Bills last season, where he just could not. yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, actually, this is my last thing. The beginning of this season, the first 2 weeks reminds me of last season, where it's like week 1, winnable game against divisional opponent. Week 2, very hard game against like prime AFC championship, looking team. And last year was the Broncos and then the Bills. This year it's Chargers and then the Ravens. And to me, it's like you have to win week 1 against the divisional opponent.
It's a must-win for the Raiders.
Yeah, it's must-win. It is a must-win game. So.
Yep. Yeah, that's it for the show. Mike, I did want to quickly ask you, since we're on the podcast right now, before we get out of here, who is going to be the 2024 NFL season MVP? Not for the Raiders, but in the NFL.
Yeah. I'll tell you what. I'll start with who it's not going to be. It's not going to be Josh Allen. I don't think it's going to be Lamar, although he's not a bad choice. I think, if anything, his team surrounding him has gotten better.
I've got a pick in my mind.
Is it Jordan Love?
No, but he could be. He could be. I don't think it will be.
I mean, honestly, from what I've seen of this offseason, my gut just tells me it's pretty simple here. It's Pat Mahomes. But I guess if I had to pick something a little off schedule, or not off schedule, but somebody not named Pat Mahomes. The first guy that's come to my mind here is CJ Stroud.
Bingo! NFL MVP. Lock it in.
Yeah, I could see it for sure. I would vote Mahomes first, but yeah, I could see it for sure.
Yep. And I'm glad that we waited until after the fantasy draft, because right now CJ Stroud is sitting on Enrique's team where he will never be moved.
Yep.
Even if you tried.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I honestly look, bookmark it. 2 hours, 4 minutes, 20 seconds. The NFL MVP will be CJ Stroud. And if I'm wrong, I'm going to look like an idiot. Like, what if CJ Stroud gets ran out of the league this year? That would not happen, but
no.
I honestly, I think he's going to throw hella touchdowns, and I think he's going to I really do think he's going to have a great year. I think the Texans could possibly win the AFC.
Okay, give me your Super Bowl pick right now. I have my Super Bowl pick that I'm hoping for. I've thought about this a couple weeks ago.
I was not prepared for this.
I'll
See,
give you the Super Bowl matchup that I'm like, my prayers would be answered as far as like, finally, we don't have a team that I just, or like a matchup where it's like somebody in the game, I'm just like, please don't win this. Like, for once, can I have a Super Bowl where it's like, I'm perfectly happy with either of these teams winning? That would be great for them. They've never won a Super Bowl before. They've never even been to a Super Bowl before. Texans versus Lions. Give it to me.
can I give you like a final four real quick?
Sure.
And then
Yeah.
the final four will inevitably be, it's going to be Chiefs versus Texans, as long as they don't play each other earlier in the playoffs.
Right.
And if they do, it's going to be one combination of those two teams against the Ravens. Yeah. I feel pretty good about that. And in the NFC, I'm going to I got three teams for the NFC as well. I've got the 49ers versus the Lions. But if not, 49ers Packers.
Yeah, and I'll throw two teams, one from each
or Packers Lions,
conference.
But
yeah, I think the team to look out for this season, not only in the NFC but in your division, is the LA Rams.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have the full belief in the Bills this year. I think the Jets are very, very interesting. And the wild card team for me is the Dolphins because, of course, right? I'd really like to see the Bengals make a run at it again, but I don't know. I can't feel confident in the run game right now. And there's still the question of Joe Burrow's wrist. He's my fantasy quarterback, and I got Jared Goff, just in case. But I hope Jamar Chase figures this thing out, plays week 1, and Joe Burrow has a phenomenal season. And I'd like to see the Bengals in the hunt.
Yeah, so if I had to pick, all right, just know my Super Bowl is going to be a combination of a matchup between those 6 teams, right? So one of the 3 AFC teams that I named versus one of the 3 NFC teams that I named. It's going to make me sick. I almost don't feel like saying the 49ers because I really do believe Super Bowl hangovers are a thing. But I really feel like if they don't get it done, if they don't go to the Super Bowl, I won't pick them to win. But I could see this as another rematch against the Chiefs, and that will make me throw up because I'm done, dude. Like
I'd be right there with you throwing up.
Yeah, so I could see it. Yeah. That's I guess who I'll pick right now. But for all I know, Super Bowl hangover season, it could be. It would be interesting. Texans versus Packers. That would be very interesting.
Yeah, I'm really pulling for Texans versus Lions, but I think maybe more realistic would be Lions versus Chiefs or Lions versus Ravens. I like Lions versus Chiefs. I like that right now. I don't like that. I like Lions versus Texans. But you know what I mean?
Yeah. We'll see how it goes. But everybody, thank you again for tuning in. Amin the Dream, Fonzie for coming back, Joel for always, Joel's always here. Yeah, man, it was an awesome episode. We got through a lot of topics, and I'm not going to scream into the mic like last year, but it's finally fucking football season.
Yes, indeed.
Mike, any last words before we get out of here?
Oh, go Raiders, go Debo, and go Grunky Peep, my fantasy team.
Yeah, I've got, go Niners. This year I drafted 2 Raiders. maybe a mistake, but I drafted Brock Bowers and Zamir White. So this year will be very interesting because I will be rooting for those players. Pretty soon we'll probably give our top 5 favorite players on each team. I'd like to do another topic like that, for the 2024 season. But yeah, we'll catch you guys next week. Please comment, like, subscribe, and keep tuning in. We enjoy to have comments, and yeah, it helps the channel grow when you subscribe. It helps push us in the algorithm. So yeah, here's to 2024, Mike.
Here we go.